Let's dive right in. Welcome to this explainer, where today we're looking at an absolutely monumental shift in modern history. We are going to track the mind-blowing transition of post-WW2 Germany. Think about it. We go from this iconic scene of joint Allied victory right into the defining ideological standoff of the entire 20th century, all in the blink of an eye.
Back in 1945, U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau basically summed up the global mood with four incredibly chilling words. He said, "Germany is our problem." For the victorious Allies, the fate of Germany wasn't just some minor administrative headache they could push to the side. No, it was the immediate question of questions. You have to remember, this was the nation that had literally sparked two devastating world wars in a quarter of a century. So the absolute burning priority for everyone involved was figuring out exactly what to do with a defeated, utterly devastated Germany just to make sure a third world war wouldn't rise from its ashes.
Section 1. The German Problem. So as the dust settles in 1945, the Allies realize they're looking at a massive power vacuum right in the heart of Central Europe. To handle this, they put together the Allied Control Council, or ACC. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The core rule for this joint governing body operating out of Berlin was that it required unanimous decisions by the US, UK, France, and the Soviet Union to run Germany as a whole. Unanimous, meaning any single veto would instantly paralyze national policies. So it happens. The occupying powers basically just fall back on doing whatever they want in their own individual zones. It was, honestly, practically designed for gridlock from day one.
Section 2. A doomed experiment. Well, it didn't take long for the cracks to show in this unique historical experiment. And the failure wasn't just due to one little misunderstanding. There were really 5 primary factors that just paralyzed the Grand Alliance. First off, simply breaking the country into distinct occupation zones created huge physical and administrative divides. Second, the collapse of the German state left this massive power vacuum that the victors naturally competed to fill. Third, you've got the deep, fundamental ideological incompatibility between Western democracies and Soviet communism. Fourth, there were bitter controversies over reparations. And fifth, the incredibly complex economic interdependence Germany had with the rest of Europe.
It was really those fourth and fifth factors, the economic clash, that proved totally insurmountable. On one side, the goals of the US and the UK rapidly shifted toward rebuilding German industry. Why? Well, they had to prevent mass starvation in their heavily populated zones, and they quickly realized Western Europe's economy just couldn't recover without German coal and industry. But look at the flip side. Neutrally contrasting this, the Soviet goals were totally different. They had suffered horrific devastation at the hands of the German army. So their primary objective was to extract massive reparations and physically dismantle German industry to take home and rebuild the USSR. It's an unsolvable dilemma, right? Feeding starving citizens versus extracting totally justified compensation.
Now check out this geopolitical math created by the occupation zones because it is absolutely fascinating. The US, UK, and France ended up occupying 84% of Germany's territory and 72% of its population. The Soviet Union, having transferred large chunks of eastern Germany over to Poland, was left with just 16% of the territory and 28% of the population. Ironically, despite their massive contribution to winning the war, this left Stalin as the demandeur. He desperately needed resources and reparations from those resource-rich Western zones. He was basically operating from a position of relative economic weakness inside Germany.
Section 3. The Tipping Point.
So by 1947 and 1948, patience on all sides was completely gone. The West decided, okay, we're abandoning this policy of postponement, and they actively moved to integrate their zones. This integration started with something called Bezonia in 1947. That was the economic merger of the British and American occupation zones. And it started strictly as an economic necessity. The British literally could not afford to keep feeding their zone all by themselves. But Bezonia very quickly became the political nucleus for a brand new separate West German state. And this, as you might guess, deeply alarmed Stalin. He was terrified of a revived Western-aligned Germany.
But the ultimate trigger? That happened on June 20, 1948. The Western powers introduced a brand new currency, the Deutschmark, into their zones. Now, this wasn't just some boring economic policy. It was a profound political statement. It threatened to totally undermine the Soviet-controlled economy in the East, and it signaled the West's clear, undeniable intention to consolidate a separate, functioning West German state.
Section 4. The Berlin Blockade and Airlift.
The introduction of the Deutschmark pushed the tension right over the edge. We are now in the first direct East-West confrontation of the Cold War, and look at how incredibly tight this timeline is. In March 1948, the Soviets walk out of the Allied Control Council. Joint governance is officially dead. June 20, the Western currency reform happens. Just 4 days later, on June 24, the Soviets react by blockading all surface routes into Berlin. And then, a mere 2 days after that, on June 26, Operation Vittles, the Allied airlift, officially begins. Notice how quickly the Cold War turned logistically hot. We're talking about a matter of days here. To truly understand why this blockade was such a huge deal, you have to picture the map in your head. West Berlin wasn't physically connected to West Germany. It was this isolated enclave sitting 100 miles deep inside the Soviet occupation zone. So, Stalin's blockade of all road, rail, and canal access was a massive, high-stakes gamble. He was betting that the sheer geographic vulnerability of the city would force the West to either abandon their plans for a West German state or abandon West Berlin entirely. 2 million. That is the number of West Berliners who were trapped inside the blockade. And that is the number of people who had to be kept alive entirely from the air. The human stakes involved here were just absolutely unbelievable. But President Truman and General Lucius Clay, they chose not to retreat. Instead, they decided to supply a modern metropolis entirely through 3 narrow air corridors. And the logistical response was just staggering. Look at this number, 13,000. During the famous Easter Parade of April 1949, U.S. and British aircraft delivered nearly 13,000 tons of coal, food, and supplies in a single 24-hour period. Planes were landing around the clock, minute by literal minute at Tempelhof, Gatow, and Tegel airfields. At its absolute peak, the airlift was moving more tonnage by air than the city had previously received by rail. It was nothing short of a logistical miracle.
Section 5. The Iron Curtain Falls.
So after nearly a year of this, Stalin realized the West just wasn't going to give up, and he wasn't willing to shoot down Allied planes and kick off World War III. So we have to ask the big question. Did Stalin's gamble actually work? Did blockading the city stop the formation of a West German state or push the West out of Berlin?
Well, spoiler alert, no. In fact, it completely backfired. The blockade was officially lifted in May 1949. But look at what the crisis actually accelerated. In April 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty was signed, creating NATO and cementing a permanent U.S. military commitment to Europe. By May, the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, was officially established. And then in October, the Soviets established the German Democratic Republic, East Germany. The division of the country was now formal and deeply entrenched.
When we compare the mindset at the very start of this explainer to the end, the shift is staggering. Think about it. In 1945, the Grand Alliance's absolute greatest fear was a revived, unified Germany once again dominating Europe. But the 1949 reality? The world now had 2 completely separate German states, both heavily armed and deeply integrated into rival Cold War blocs. Those initial fears were entirely replaced by the new, terrifying architecture of the Cold War.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. As much as the division of Germany was a tragedy, it tore families apart and created the literal front lines of the Cold War, consider this. How did the failure of joint occupation ironically pave the way for unprecedented peace and integration in Western Europe? Because out of the ashes of that failed collaboration, West Germany was heavily integrated into the Atlantic world. Historical Franco-German rivalries were finally overcome, and the true foundation for a modern, democratic Europe was laid. It really forces us to re-examine the legacy of a divided map. Thanks so much for exploring this complex history with me today.